So here we are again, going into another weekend, still reviewing these series of verses in the Śikhariṇī Metre from Saundarananda, cantos 14, 15, 16, which are the last three chapters in the Buddha's laying out of his teaching for Nanda. So the two verses we're going to do today are the end of canto 15. The two verses at the end of that are numbers 1568 and 1569. And this chapter's title is Vitarka Prahana, abandoning ideas. The three verses we looked at last time at the end of canto 14, the canto title is Adi Prasthana. Adi means beginning, Prastha means like standing up or marching out. So I translated it as stepping out. So the central theme is practicing in seclusion, with the word vivich, separation, vivikta, vivikte, to the fore in those verses, separation. But we also, last time we reviewed those three verses at the end of canto 13, with an emphasis on sham, which means softening or softened. Shanta means softened or pacified, calmed. And shanti, the feminine noun, means peace or softening. So peace and softening are the same word. So we were reflecting on that in light of the final line in canto 16, which is not in Śikhariṇī meter, but is in an even longer meter called Atiditi meter, Atidriti meter, and that line slips off the tongue very easily. Tad viryam kuru shantaye viniyatam viryehi sarvardaya. So make an effort in pursuit of peace or in the direction of softening. For in effort, sarve hi, viryehi, in effort, viniyatam, assuredly, without any doubt, sarvardaya, all growth, all kinds of growth. So all kinds of growth, all kinds of prosperity. That is the prosperity of the farmer who has a bountiful harvest of corn. The prosperity of a diver who emerges with a treasure, a bounty of treasure of coral and pearls. Then the prosperity of the best of men who shakes off usurpers and enjoys royal sovereignty. Which, in its hidden meaning, would suggest the sovereignty that we enjoy in Zazen, which is a kind of growth. But the fourth line, it definitely includes not only kind of worldly prosperity, but the ultimate prosperity of faring well, of prapanch upashamam, the softening, the melting away of prapancha, objectifying others, or othering reality. That's the ultimate kind of growth. to let go of objects, let go of everything. That's what we're working towards in the direction of softening. That's the growth we're working towards. So these two verses in Canto 15 are kind of in the middle way between Canto 14, which is Adi Prasthana, and Canto 16, which is Arya Satya Vyakhyana. Vyakhyana means communicating. Arya means noble, Aryan. Satya, the truth. So communicating the noble truth. So these two verses are the gold mining metaphor, and they're in the middle way of two kinds of preaching about softening and growth. And I meant to mention it last time. I think I criticised Nishijima Sensei, my late Zen teacher. I think I criticised him justifiably for not explicitly understanding or teaching the teaching of emptiness. What he taught was more realism, the antithesis of emptiness, actually. But so realism has something hard about it, and that is nowhere better demonstrated than by George Soros, the champion of British empiricism or hard-nosed realism. It's got something very hard about it. Objective reality is like out there, hard. You know, like weeds grow and flowers fall. You know, you can, I think, misunderstand possibly. See, even Master Dogen, I don't think, I somehow doubt. When I say doubt, I don't doubt. I did doubt for a long time, but I don't doubt. Master Dogen was a Sarvastivadian. He believed that all things exist. That's the harsh reality. If you want to call it harsh reality, that Master Dogen didn't really see clearly that the Sarvasti teaching that all exists was the opposite of what the Buddha taught. The Buddha taught that in the middle way, what happens is neither it exists or it does not exist. Sarvasti means it all exists. But the teaching of the middle is no, it doesn't exist, and neither does it not exist. It's happening in the middle way. It's a very, very simple teaching. And it's so that what I've been reflecting on, you see, what's the opposite of hard-nosed realism as championed by George Soros? It's the mind of a child that Jesus spoke of, for example, in the Gospel of Matthew 18, the greatest in the kingdom. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Jesus invited a little child to stand among them. "Truly, I tell you," he said, "unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes a little child like this in my name welcomes me. See, in Alexander work also, sometimes a teacher will tell you, like, just stand there like a child in front of its mother, like not the one who knows how to direct himself up, but the one whose hands are empty, the one whose mind is empty. We don't know where up is. Nellie Ben-Or was a teacher who was really good at insisting that you gave up whatever it was that wasn't empty in your hands, that when you're putting hands on a pupil. I learned, the way she could get the best out of me is I had to stand there like a complete incompetent who couldn't do anything. It was just like, I can't really put it into words, but I just knew that if I stood there and made no effort at all to know what up was, then she could take me up. She it's very difficult to put into words, but if I just surrendered completely, she would put her hands on my head and neck, and I used to say it's like a JCB. I feel it right, and if you hear this and you're an Alexander teacher, it'll be a stimulus for you to do something. The amazing thing, she wasn't doing anything. She was just thinking my head out from there, as she said. And it makes sense in light of emptiness, how just a thought, just thinking, but not as people understand thinking, how Alexander thinking can bring about such change, but only if I had like the mind of a child, a docile mind. So I've been tinkering with these. I was up before dawn this morning, tinkering with the translation of these gold mining verses, in which one word is vasagatam. So I've translated it as softly yielding or surrendered. And this morning I thought docile. Docile means easy to teach. It's cognate with a doctrine and from the Latin docere. So docile is a good word. Responsive could be another word. Obedient, compliant. But we'll come to it shortly. But I've gone with docile, and thinking that kind of idea of the mind of a child, it's easy to teach, not the mind of the Zen master, the expert. See, I've noticed one thing that really annoys me. If it annoys me, it's doubtless a function of something I haven't resolved in myself, is when people who are junior to me by any stretch of the seniority and senior and junior in Zen. I mean, I've been at it for over 40 years, from the age of 22. So when people who I guess have received the transmission themselves along the way, when they are too familiar with me, as if like we're buddies who know a thing or two about Zen, I just want to tell them to fuck the fuck right off. You don't know anything. So, I mean, on the other hand, to focus on the positive, and if I name names, Jean Rat, Martin Lake, Georgios Skounis, as I've been persevering with these verses in Śikhariṇī Metre, I mean, I learned something from Jean, a comment that he made on Facebook, which actually got erased, and that annoyed me, because Jean said something very valuable there, and I would like to have quoted his exact words. But what he said was that he realised that these verses we're going through are root verses. Like in MMK, they're actually explicitly called mula, root, radical, mula madhyamaka karika. Karika means verse, madhyamaka, the middle, mula, root. So root, middle, verse. And they're root because we keep going back to them, like in the gold mining metaphor. We go over them again and again. We turn them over and over and over again in our minds. We keep going back to them. And from that, what happens is growth. We talk about softening and growth. And that's the point. We go back. And what we thought about them before is kind of has to melt away. We have to give it up. Whatever idea we had or what words we liked as a translation. There's a softening process. The more we carry on with it, something melts. And so in that direction of softening, we're making an effort. And in that effort lies growth. And Jean expressed that very, very nicely and very humbly. And similarly, Martin and George, when I get the feedback from them, they're not trying to show how clever they are or what they've understood. What I see is evidence that they're doing the work on themselves, and growth is happening through that. So that's a good example. It's like a child learning how to read. That's the attitude we want. We don't know. We're not here to be the knowers. We're the explorers. As was said in the Alexander technique, I think Margaret Goldie was famous for saying that. We're explorers. As Alexander teaches, it's not that we know something that we're passing on. It's how to explore, how to work on oneself. That's what Marjorie's teaching was all about. How to work on oneself. There has to be a softening. More and more softening. Shantaye. Tadviryam kuru shantaye. So that is so simple. Like in Alexander again, Marjorie said, a child of 6, a child of 3 can understand this work, I think FM said. But give me a man who's been educated, and God help me. It's like the same thing. Give me a man who's thoroughly versed in Zen. He's not going to. He won't get it at all. A child of 3 can understand emptiness. Emptiness just means that there's no division between self and external world. And realism misses that point. Realism is blinkered. It's dual, self and subject and object. So I was getting around to praising Nishijima Roshi because Nishijima Roshi, very, very clearly, his point is the Buddha's teaching is a philosophy of action. And in our action, subject and object are one. But you see, this is a wrong explanation because it suggests that without action, subject and object wouldn't be one. Whereas the teaching of emptiness is subject and object are never separated in the first place. There is no subject without object and no object without subject. You see, if we understand Nishijima Roshi's teaching literally, if we take it literally, not intuitively, if we just actually listen to what he's saying and follow it, that's what I would do, you see. A very literal approach. You see, like when he talks about keeping the spine vertically by pulling in the chin, people heard it, like Mike Latchford heard it, but he didn't necessarily follow it. You know, he made his own mind up and he was quite happy to sort of listen to that and then sort of, no, but I if he told me to do that, then I did it to the nth degree, you know. So that was a strength and a weakness in a way. Strength because if you go wrong in being too literal, eventually you have to recognise your mistake because you become stuck and rigid. But that's what if you describe subject and object as being separate, and then in action they're united. That's what you get. See, I tested out his theory in practice and found what was lacking in it. But in his, as I've often joked, Nishijima Roshi, or Japanese people in general, they tend to understand emptiness in practice, even if they don't understand it in theory. So Nishijima Sensei's theory, for me, was misleading, because subjects and objects are not separate in the first place. That's you won't live in duality, in non-duality as described. So yeah, vivikte niyadvandvo viharati karti shanta hrdaya. That's the second line of that's the second line. So first line is Yadi dvandvarame jagati vishaya vyagra hrdaye. If in a world which is distracted to the core by objects, Yadi niyadvandvarame, a world that delights in duality. Yadi if dvandvarame. Arama means delighting in. Dvandva, duality. So if in a world that delights in duality and is distracted to the core by objects, that's the world of the realist, you see. Because the realist doesn't realise he's dual, because he thinks that reality is all there is. But actually, the realism is dualism, because it says there's objective reality out there, and you, soft-minded, innocent, childlike sucker, need to open your eyes to the reality that's out there. So it's the opposite of child mind. It's being the kind of the wizened veteran who has given up childlike innocence. Then the second line is Vivikte niyadvandvo viharati karti shanta hrdaya. Vivikte, in seclusion, in separateness. Niyadvandvo, free of duality. Viharati, he fares well, he goes well. Karti, a man of action. Shanta hrdaya, his heart shanta, softened. His heart is softened at peace. Is he? Contrary to being the hard-nosed realist, he's got a soft heart. You see, the ironic thing, as I was saying, Nishijima Roshi didn't explain this clearly, but he was a man of action. He wasn't just preaching action without walking the walk. He did find peace in action. I'll illustrate that by a story. Once he had two young visitors from somewhere in it may have been Thailand, and he thought of it. So he visited his office in the morning, and as was his habit, he would take people for lunch. And so he thought it'd be a nice idea for these young guys to meet me, who was also a young guy at that time, in my mid-20s. So he phoned me up and said, come down to Ichigai, we'll go for lunch together. And I can't remember how I was late, some kind of misunderstanding, but I cycled down there, and by the time I walked into the restaurant, obviously they'd been waiting. They hadn't ordered, and they'd been waiting, and obviously it was embarrassing or a bit stressful for Sensei. And what I noticed is when I arrived, he didn't have anything to say, hardly at all, but he was absolutely focused on chewing his meal when it arrived. You know, it was like he was practicing what he preached, because his mind wasn't at peace there, somewhat. It was a stressful situation, you know, there'd been a miscommunication. and I kept everybody waiting. So he's just focused on action, and the action that was available to him at the time was chewing his meal. So that, you talk about kriti shanta hridaye, a man of action, his heart at peace. Nishijima Sensei demonstrated that. Adi prasthana, he's like marching out in action. He was good at that. So, these verses of the gold mining metaphor very much relate to softening. Shamayati means he causes to melt. He causes the mind to melt away. And again, fiddling with this verse this morning, I made it, before it was more ambiguous, but I decided to be explicit in explaining in the translation, in clarifying in the translation that Samayati, he causes to melt away. What he causes to melt away is the mind as object to be cleansed of afflictions. I added the word object because that's the point I want to make. That's the point that's Asphagorsi is making in these 3 canto endings. See that they all work together very, very well. 14, 15 and 16. The Śikhariṇī verses in 14, 15 and 16 with the addition of the Atidriti verse at the end of 16. So that's 3, 2, 3 and 1. 9 verses. Those 9 verses are so powerful. Just as a kind of a book unto themselves, a teaching unto themselves. So, this canto title, Canto 15, is Vitarka Prahana. And what I'm getting at is that the one big idea to be abandoned is realism, in the sense that reality exists out there separately, independent of us. If we understood in that light, viśodhya kleśebhyaḥ, to be cleansed of afflictions, has to do with prapanchopashama, what Nagarjuna said the Buddha taught, the softening, the melting away, the cessation of prapancha, othering. So, if we objectify things, then the mind also is the object, is an object to be cleansed of afflictions. But as I explained a few talks ago with reference to the Rahula Sutta, the Buddha tells Rahula, Pasambhayam citta saṅkāraṇ asasi sami tisikati. He trains himself, tisikati. Pasambhayam, causing to melt away, citta saṅkāra. Mind as a fabricated reality, or mind fabricating reality, can be either of those. If we take it with body, Pasambhayam kaya saṅkāraṇ asasi sami tisikati. He trains himself, tisikati. Asasi sami, I will breathe out. He trains himself like this, iti sikati. Asasi sami, I will breathe out. Pasasi sami, I will breathe in. Pasambhayam, causing to melt away. Kaya saṅkāraṇ, body as a fabricated reality. The body as a fabrication, the mind as a fabrication. That's prapancha. And so I've decisively decided that's what he's talking about here. No ambiguity. Viśodhya kleśebhyaḥ samayati manaḥ. He causes to melt away mind as an object to be cleansed of afflictions. Mind is not an object for us to clean, to purify. We can't separate. There's no objective mind. There's just the empty mind. So in Canto 14, when Asvaghosha, the Buddha, speaks of vasan atma ramaha, he dwells enjoying aramaha, atma, himself. He dwells himself. Charan atmaro. He goes around. Charan atmaramo. Enjoying aramaha, atma, himself. This is to be a success is simply that. It's like a child playing. You're just going around enjoying yourself. And that's not selfish, because enjoying oneself is not separate from everything. Hence Marjorie Barlow's wisdom. If you're happy in yourself, it will spread out as if in ripples. See, that's the practical implication of emptiness. We don't have to do anything in the world. If we go around enjoying ourselves, that covers everything in light of emptiness. The world is changed. The world is changed if we soften our own minds. So again, back to Jesus' teaching recorded in Matthew 18. Jesus invited a little child to stand among them. Truly I tell you, he said, unless you change, drop off your realism. Let that hard-nosed realism turn into something softer. Unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So he's echoing what the Buddha says right at the end of Canto 14. Tato bhunte shreshtam tridashapati rajadapi sukham. He enjoys sovereignty greater than the Lord of the 30 gods, greater than Indra. It's saying the same thing. The greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Okay, let's get on with the verses themselves. Here we go again. Da dum 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 dum. Da 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 dum dum da 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 dum. krameṇādbhiḥ śuddhaṁ kanakam pāṁsu-vyavahitaṁ yathāgnau karmāraḥ pacati bhṛśam āvartayati tathā yogācāro nipuṇam doṣa-vyavahitaṁ viśodhya kleśebhyaḥ śamayati manaḥ saṁkṣipati. As a smith in this world melts in the fire and turns over and over again gold that was washed with water, separated step by step from dirt, so does a practitioner in this world cause to melt away, mind as object to be cleansed of afflictions. And so does he collect his mind, separated from harm. Yathā sva-cchandād upanayati karmāśraya-sukhaṁ suvarṇaṁ karmāro bahu-vidham alaṁkāra-vidhiṣu manaḥ-śuddho bhikṣur vāśagatamabhijñāsvapitathā yathā śamayati manaḥ-śuddho. And as the smith guides at will gold with easy workability into a wide choice of designs, so too does the mind-cleansed bhikkhu soften the mind and direct a docile mind as he wishes, wherever he wishes, among the powers of knowing. So the title of this talk will be number 2, Softening and Growth in the Śikhariṇī Metre 2 of 3. And what I've omitted to mention so far is that we've talked a lot about softening. In a sense, this is in the middle. It's the link between softening and growth, because softening is there in Shanta Hridaya, Shama Sukha Rasajna. He knows the taste of peace, softening and ease, softness and ease. So Shama, Shanta, separateness, seclusion is the beginning of softening. It's abandoning of duality. Dualities that duality makes a hard and fast separation between subject and object. So practicing in seclusion, not being interested, not being distracted by objects, is like the starting point of softening. Adi prasthana, setting out on the softening path, we could say. And Canto 16 is continuing in the direction of softening, making an effort in that direction. Virya, it's about virya, making an effort. Because in virya, in effort, viryehi, in effort, sarvardaya, all kinds of prosperity, including the growth that we want, from the cultivation, bhavanam bhavehi, cultivate, the practice of cultivation, the Buddha tells Rahula. Patavi samam Rahula bhavanam bhavehi. Cultivate, Rahula, like the earth, the practice of cultivation. It's spring and I'm starting to transplant seedlings and so on, so that line resonates at the moment. Patavisamam rahula bhavanam bhavehi. Bhavehi, cultivate. Bhavanam, cultivating. Cultivate rahula, the practice of cultivating. Patavisamam, like the earth. Like the earth, like space. If you think about a tree growing, it's in our world, which is distracted to the core by objects, things become two-dimensional. We think in a linear way. But if you look at the oak tree growing, or the apple tree, now in blossom, it's four-dimensional at least. It's not flat, it's not two-dimensional. And that's like space, not fixed anywhere, not fixed in any dimension, not fixed in 2 dimensions, not fixed even in 3 dimensions, because it's changing through time. It's empty. So it's a function of spring and summer and winter. The whole of the spring and the summer is there in the apple tree. See, Master Do, in the chapter Kuge, for example, which is Nishijima translated it, flowers in the sky, and I changed that to flowers in space, which is a little bit more empty, but really a better translation would be flowers in emptiness, or empty flowers. But at that time, we kind of scoffed at emptiness as being a kind of abstract, soft, not hard, not a realistic teaching. But people's understanding of emptiness wasn't realistic, Nishijima Sensei thought, which is probably true. But we threw the baby out with the bathwater by not realizing that the ku of Kuge was talking about emptiness, not space as one of the elements, which I'm talking about now. So the Buddha said, akasa samam rahula bhavanam bhavehi. Cultivate rahula, the practice of cultivating, like space, which is not fixed anywhere. So that's akasa sama, like space. That's not the same as emptiness. Same with water and fire and wind. Those are the elements. We can practice letting happen in the same way that the elements let anything happen, because they're empty. But that isn't the same. Doesn't mean that the elements are emptiness. So emptiness is shunyata, and space is akasa. So flowers in space was not a good translation of the ku of Kuge, because the ku of Kuge means emptiness. Master Dogen's talking about emptiness in that chapter. So why do I criticize him then as not understanding emptiness? Because he accepted that the Sarvastivadi was the ultimate teaching, but it's the opposite of the ultimate teaching. There's no doubt about that. All you have to do is study Nagarjuna, and I'm not saying that as an expert. It's like I'm saying it with a child mind. It's, oh, really? Master Dogen got it wrong. That's simple as that. A child could understand it if the teaching of emptiness is properly taught to them. So I'm digressing. What I wanted to say is how this relates to growth. And it relates to growth in its linking to chapter 16, which is all about the conclusion of chapter 16, the communication of the Noble Truths, is that lovely childlike simplicity statement. Tad vidyam kuru shantaye. Vinyatam vidyehi sarvadaya. So make an effort in the direction of softening, for in effort assuredly lies all growth. That sums up the Buddha's teaching there in 19 syllables. It's all there. So this relates to growth because manaḥ-śuddho, he directs the mind. Yate-cham, as he likes, wherever he likes. Abhijnasu, among the powers of knowing. So the powers of knowing mean not the knowledge of the expert, but the knowledge of a child. The knowledge of a child in how to cleanse the mind, to free the mind from pollutants. In the expert's understanding, the expert's got a PhD in psychology, so he knows all about the mind, all about the emotional afflictions, the pollutants, sarvasravan, you can explain what all those are. But it's not that kind of, that PhD knowledge is not, according to Jesus, and I think he was channeling the Buddha's teaching, is not what allows us to enter the kingdom of heaven. What he's talking about is the ultimate wisdom of the child who has never learned to separate subject and object. So separating our mind from harm ultimately means not harming our child mind by prapancha, by othering stuff, by objectifying stuff. So the word, it's interesting that MMK starts with a dedicatory verse saying prapanchopashama ya pratitya samutpadam ya pratitya samutpadam sa pashyati dam sa pashyati dukam samudayam chaiva nirodham margam evacha. He who sees dependent arising sees this suffering, its coming together, its cessation, and the path. That's the Buddha's teaching. But the dedicatory verse, from which I just freely associated to another verse, but the dedicatory verse is this: Anirodham anutpadam anuchedam ashashvatam anekartam ananartam anagamam anirgamam. So not anirodham anutpadam, not cessation, beyond starting, beyond arising. Anuchedam ashashvatam, beyond nihilism, beyond eternalism. So beyond annihilation, beyond eternity. Anekartam ananartam, beyond identification, beyond differentiation. Anagamam anirgamam, beyond coming, beyond going away. Because it's happening. As Toby said in a comment yesterday, this is something ineffable coming like this. This is something coming like this. That's an expression of emptiness. It means this is happening. This is happening like this. It's not saying an object is coming like this. It's like in France, arriver. It means il arrive comme ça. It's coming like this, it's happening like this. It's not a thing coming, it's events happening like this. So events happening like this don't have a beginning and don't have an end. Anirodham anutpadam. They're beyond cessation and beyond arising. Because what arises is a thing that has a beginning and an end. But in light of emptiness, there is no such thing. Events are happening. It's so simple, a child can understand it. But we don't understand it because we're conditioned to think in terms of objective reality. British empiricism thinks scientifically. That's the first of the dedicatory verses, and here's the second. Ya pratitya samutpadam prapansho-pashamam shivam deshayamasa sambuddhas tam vande vadatam varam. Ya, he who, pratitya samutpadam, dependently arisen, prapansho-pashamam, melting away of prapancha, of othering, shivam, well-being, happiness. The happiness, the dependently arisen happiness of the melting away of othering. That's what the Buddha taught. The happiness, which is dependently arisen, which is empty. The happiness which happens, which is prapansho-pashamam, the melting away of prapancha, a rest from objectification, as Gustav likes to call it, a rest. The melting away of othering, a rest from objectification. Deshayamasa, he taught, sambuddhas, the fully enlightened Buddha, the fully awakened Buddha. Ya pratitya samutpadam prapansho-pashamam shivam deshayamasa sambuddhas tam vande vadatam varam. I praise him, the best of speakers.